I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I want to talk about one of my favorite houses, which is the third house. And the third house is a Kama house. What does Kama mean? It means desire. So there's three Kama houses, which are relative to the air signs. And Kama actually means desire. So I'll explain that in just a minute. But the third house is relative to the third sign, which is Gemini, ruled by Mercury, which that's what the third house is really all about. It's about our communications. That's what Mercury's about. But if you look at the other Kama houses, they're also the air sign houses. So if you go to the seventh house is the house that deals with Libra, and Libra's all about how we relate in love relationships and marriage. The 11th house is the other Kama house, which deals with what? Friends and groups. So the way that I think it relates to desire is that these houses relative to the air signs, air is all about how we communicate with people. Third house is our siblings. The seventh house is our marriage partner. The 11th house is our friends. We have to connect with other people. This is a fact and a need. Otherwise, we wouldn't all have cell phones or be watching all the social media that we do. We need to connect to others. These are the houses that deal with communications. So before I really hone in on the third house, let me point out the book that I'm referring all of this from. This is one of my favorite books as well because I love the study of the houses. It is Astrology, the Divine Order of the Universe. And the reason why I named that, it's all about numbers and how everything fits together. This is a mathematical science. And you find that the relative meanings of the houses are derived from one another. So the third house, as I said, is one of my favorite houses because one of the most important things that it's all about, besides communications and everything to do with communications, which does deal with our learning, our schooling, writing, anything to do with how we pass on and learn information. But like I said, the other most important thing is it deals with courage, ambition, drive, willpower. That's hard to come by. Willpower is something we all need in order to really get ahead in this world, to achieve any of our dreams. We have to have the willpower. We have to have the emotional drive. That's all the courage that's contained within the third house. Now remember I said the third house deals with competition. Yes, that's part of the willpower, the ambition, drive, competition. So who are we in most competition with early on in life? Our siblings, brothers and sisters. So that's a powerful connotation and meaning to the third house because this is our relationship that we form with our siblings. Now, another thing that the third house can deal with, it deals with early learning process, early schooling, elementary school. So it really does form how we think, how we feel at an early age, our development. This is the third house. And the third house can deal with short distance travels, whereas the opposing houses give relevance to the same meanings of the houses. The third house will deal with lower education. As the ninth house deals with higher education, the third house deals with short distance travels, whereas the ninth house deals with long distance travels. You'll see how these houses all connect in such a beautiful way to better understand life and how it all works. But the third house is also, I'm going to start talking about some of the relationships to the other houses, but remember, it is an Upachaya house. The Upachaya houses are the houses that mean over time you improve and you get better. You improve yourself. So it's like a muscle that's trying to develop. You have to work it and then it gets stronger and stronger. That's what Upachaya houses are about. that there's a struggle initially, but the struggle pays off to success. So the Upachaya houses in Vedic astrology, and they say to put the malefic planets in the Upachaya houses gives us a drive to achieve and improve ourselves. And they are houses 6, 3, 6, 11, and I was always taught the 10th house is Upachaya as well. Some traditionalists say it's just 3, 6, and 11. I believe it's also the 10th house. Now, because it deals with learning, it also deals with hearing. And so the third house deals with listening and hearing. It actually rules the ears. If malefic planets are there, there may be problems with the hearing, or there could even be earaches at an early age. Or the third house also rules the hands. So if it deals with communications and it rules the hands, it deals with writing specifically. So great authors and writers have a powerful, powerful third house. And I love the third house because it also pertains to entertainers. If you find some very powerful entertainers, you will find very powerful planets in the third house. So the third house deals with entertainers and performers and talent. And writing, particularly talent in writing. But if you find there's a strong entertainer, they're going to have powerful planets in the third house, or the planet that rules the third house will be placed beautifully or exalted or in its own sign. There's something about the third house that relates always to self-expression and entertaining. So because it is siblings, Mars in Vedic astrology is the indicator of siblings, as we call it the Karaka. So Mars is the Karaka for the third house. But if you have Mars in the third house, because it is the Karaka for siblings in the third house of siblings, you'll have a very contentious relationship with a sibling. You will always have some kind of separation or disagreements. And even if you don't now, you will. It's the way that Mars operates in the third house. So be aware of that. Now, since the third house deals with lower education, the ninth with higher education, if you have a planet that rules the third and the ninth, or the ruler of the ninth and the third, you will want to be a teacher. And at some point in your life, you will end up teaching. And the third house deals with travels. So, but mainly short distance travels. So it can really be about people who travel a lot in the car or commute a lot, because it's a lot of back and forth, busy travel. So it is definitely the house of creativity. And you know, we think of the fifth house as creativity. But in reality, the fifth house is the third house from the third house. That's why the fifth house deals with creativity, because the creativity originates in the third house. It's talent. So remember, when I'm talking about how counting from house to house, don't be afraid to do this. This is really simple. It's just when I start saying these words, people don't follow me. They don't try. So let's go. If you're starting from the third house, third, fourth, fifth, the fifth house is the third from the third. Therefore, it has all the meanings repeated that the third house is about. Communications, intelligence, learning, and most of all, creativity. So that's why the fifth house rules creativity, because it's the third house from the third house. So another thing about it is talking about bhavapavam from house to house. We talk about the third house being the eighth house from the eighth house. So if you start from the eighth house, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 1, 2, 3, it is the eighth house from the eighth house. So therefore the third house has all of the eighth house meanings, which revolve around major transformations, which deal with research, analysis, metaphysical studies, and death. And I want to share with you that when I had an array of planets transiting through my third house, both of my parents died. Because not only is it the eighth house from the eighth house that represents death, it is the 12th house from the fourth house. Just look at where the fourth house is. You go all the way around 12 houses. It's the 12th from the fourth. And that deals with what? The end of the family. Plus it's the 8th from the 8th. You will find so many instances when people have transits going through the third house. That's when people may lose their family members, not necessarily the 8th. So the third house is also the house right before the fourth house. So what I have discovered is that when planets are transiting, particularly Jupiter in the third house, that's when people move. Not when Jupiter's in the fourth house, they're already there. It's the third house. You'll see when Jupiter's transiting in the third house, that's when you move, whether you planned on it or not. By the time Jupiter's in your fourth house, you're buying furniture, you're settling in, you're putting roots down. You'll move when Jupiter transits the third house. So another thing I love about the third house is its value in terms of looking at it as the length of life. There's two houses that deal with the length of life, and it is the 8th and the 3rd. And if you assess the planets in the 3rd, or the ruler of the 3rd, or planets in the 8th or ruler of the 8th, you can assess pretty much if somebody will have a long or short life. Now, I don't do this. I will not tell people these things, but this is how you can pretty much assess somebody's constitution and strength. So the reason why those two houses are considered the length of life, because remember the third house is the willpower. It's your life force. That's what your willpower is. But it's especially because it is, if you'll go to the 3rd and the 8th house, the 7th and the 2nd houses are called the Marika houses. That actually means killer, Marika. And planets in these houses do represent death. You know, we're so trained to think about the 8th house and the 12th house as death. But the Marika houses, especially when your dasha rulers are in these houses, can sometimes be the houses of death. It is a fact. So if the 2nd and the 7th are the Marika houses, which represent death, then the houses of life, the length of life, are going to be 12th from these houses. So the 3rd house is the 2nd, the 2nd is the 12th from the 3rd. So it's the ending of death. So it gives life. Does that make sense? It's as well as the 7th is the 12th from the 8th. So you see, if the 8th house is life, then the 7th is Marika because it is the 12th from the 8th. Now, if you didn't get that, don't worry. Just realize that the houses that give length of life are going to be 8 and 3. So it's the 3rd house that gives the strength, the energy, the courage, the vitality, willpower. That is a powerful, important house in a chart. Deals with how we communicate. We start our communications initially with our siblings. That's where we learn to be competitive. Remember, siblings are probably the ones that we're the most competitive when at an early age. So this is the house of ambition and competition as well. Find a lot of athletes with powerful planets dealing with 3rd house because this gives them their ability to really fight and achieve and want to be the best. So I particularly love the third house because I have planets there. I actually have my Jupiter moon, and I teach, I write, I travel. I was even a flight attendant. And if you consider all of those variables, it's like the metaphysical side of what I do as well, because the third house deals with, it's the 8th from the 8th, dealing with metaphysics. And it is also, with metaphysics, it can deal with psychology. I got a degree in psychology. So don't forget to look at these houses as they relate to one another. That's where the richness and the meaning and the understanding is going to really come through, understanding astrology, because you've got to first understand the platform and the stage that the planets perform on to understand astrology. So with that, I'd like to close. If you would like more information on me, you can always go to my website, which is galacticcenter.org. Or if you would like to join our community of Vedic astrologers, really learn Vedic astrology, become an astrologer, go to my university website, which is University of Vedic Astrology.com. Thank you.